The holographic projection flickered to life in the depths of Earth's military command center, casting an eerie blue glow across Admiral Kane's weathered face. Before him materialized the imposing figure of High Commander Vex, his 4 arms crossed. In a gesture that somehow managed to convey both authority and disdain across the vast gulf of space and species. Humans of Earth. Vex's voice resonated through the chamber's speakers, each word carefully measured and dripping with condescension. The Galactic Council has reached its decision regarding your species' petition for recognition. Kane remained perfectly still, his gray eyes fixed on the alien's reptilian features. Around him, the command staff held their collective breath. 3 years had passed since humanity's first contact with the galactic community, 3 years of diplomatic negotiations, cultural exchanges, and increasingly tense discussions about Earth's place among the stars. Your species shows promise, Vex continued, his scaled head tilting slightly. Your adaptability is noted. Your technological progress, while primitive by our standards, demonstrates potential. However, the Council requires proof that humanity deserves a seat among the civilized worlds. Admiral Kane felt his jaw clench involuntarily. He'd expected this moment, had prepared for it, but hearing the words spoken aloud still sent a chill down his spine. The Council's tests were legendary throughout the galaxy. Species that failed simply vanished from existence, their worlds rendered uninhabitable by weapons that could crack planets like eggs. You will be given one opportunity to demonstrate your worth, the alien commander declared. In 72 standard hours, a battlefleet will arrive at coordinates we have transmitted to your vessels. You will meet us there with your finest warship. If it impresses the Council's representatives, your species will be granted provisional membership. If it fails to meet our standards. Vex's pause stretched into uncomfortable silence, his yellow eyes boring into the camera with predatory intensity. Well, let us simply say that the galaxy has no place for species that cannot defend themselves adequately. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the command center in stunned quiet. Kane stared at the empty space where the hologram had been, his mind racing through calculations and possibilities. 72 hours. Not much time to prepare for what might be humanity's final exam. Sir, Colonel Hayes, his aide-de-camp, stepped forward hesitantly. What are your orders? Kane turned away from the projection platform, his expression grim but determined. Contact Captain Blake immediately. Tell him it's time to bring the Defiance home. A murmur ran through the assembled officers. The Defiance, humanity's greatest secret, their ace in the hole that had been under construction in the asteroid belt for the past 18 months. None of the aliens knew of its existence, hidden as it was among the rocky debris beyond Mars. Kane had hoped they'd never need to reveal it, that diplomacy might prevail where force could not, but the Council had made their intentions clear. This wasn't about diplomacy anymore. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Sci-Fi stellar conflict is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you're hungry for HFY battles and tales of human valor against alien might, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring these front lines to you. Admiral, Hayes pressed. The coordinates they transmitted, they're expecting us to meet them in open space, far from any stellar bodies. No cover, no tactical advantages. Kane nodded grimly. That's exactly what they want. A clean fight with no variables, no surprises. They want to see what we're made of when we can't rely on tricks or environmental factors. He paused, a cold smile playing at the corners of his mouth. They're about to learn that humans don't need environmental advantages to be dangerous. The next 72 hours would determine whether humanity earned its place among the stars or became another cautionary tale whispered in the dark corners of the galaxy. Kane had seen the specifications for the Defiance, had watched the test footage that was classified beyond even most military clearances. The aliens thought they were dealing with a primitive species, barely capable of interstellar travel. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. High Commander Vex stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Conquest, his 4 arms clasped behind his back as he surveyed the assembled fleet through the massive viewport. 27 vessels hung in the void before him, representing the military. Might of 7 different species. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering, capable of reducing entire continents to molten slag with a single salvo. Status report, he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. Sub-Commander Tor, a crystalline being whose body refracted light into prismatic patterns, consulted his readings. All vessels report. Ready, High Commander. We have dreadnoughts from the hegemony, battlecruisers from the collective, and destroyer squadrons from the rim worlds. Combined firepower exceeds anything short of a full fleet engagement. Vex nodded approvingly. The Council had wanted to send a message with this demonstration, and the assembled fleet certainly accomplished that goal. No single species had ever faced such overwhelming force during their assessment. Most civilizations brought their proudest vessels to these encounters, only to watch them be systematically dismantled by weapons they couldn't comprehend. Any sign of the humans? Vex inquired, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Negative, sir. Long-range sensors detect. No approaching vessels. The rendezvous point remains empty, except for our own fleet. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through Vex's scaled features. Perhaps they've reconsidered. Many species choose to spend their final hours in the comfort of their homeworld, rather than face the inevitable in the cold of space. But, even as he spoke the words, something nagged at the back of his consciousness. His species had dominated the galaxy for over 3 millennia, and in that time, he'd learned to trust his instincts. The humans had surprised the Council more than once during the diplomatic negotiations. Their adaptability was genuinely remarkable, their problem-solving capabilities unprecedented among newly contacted species. Sir, Tor's voice carried a note of uncertainty that immediately caught Vex's attention. We're detecting some unusual readings on the passive sensors. Define unusual. The crystalline being's faceted head turned toward his commander. There's something out there, High Commander. Multiple somethings. The sensors are picking up gravitational anomalies, energy signatures that don't match any known propulsion systems. But when we focus our active scanners on the locations, we find nothing. Vex felt his secondary heart skip a beat. In 3,000 years of galactic dominance, his species had encountered every form of stealth technology imaginable. Cloaking devices, sensor scramblers, dimensional phase shifters, all of them had been cataloged, studied, and countered. But this was different. Show me, he ordered. The main display flickered to life, showing a 3-dimensional representation of the surrounding space. Red dots marked the positions of the Council fleet, while ghostly blue phantoms appeared and disappeared at seemingly random intervals throughout the displayed volume. The readings are inconsistent, Tor explained. Whatever's out there appears to be moving, but not in any pattern we can predict. Sometimes the signatures are massive, suggesting vessels larger than our dreadnoughts. Other times they vanish entirely, as if they never existed. Sub-Commander Krill, a mantis-like creature from the outer reaches, clicked his mandibles nervously. Could it be some form of natural phenomenon? Gravitational echoes from a nearby stellar body? Negative, Tor replied immediately. The nearest star is light years away. These readings are definitely artificial in origin. Vex studied the display intently, his tactical mind racing through possibilities. The humans had been silent for the past 47 hours, ever since the deadline had passed. No communications, no approaching vessels, no last-minute diplomatic overtures. Just an empty rendezvous point and these impossible sensor readings. High Commander, the communications officer reported. We're receiving a transmission on standard diplomatic frequencies. Put it through. The view screen shimmered, and suddenly a human face appeared before them. The man was middle-aged, with steel-gray hair and calm blue eyes that seemed to take in everything without revealing anything in return. He wore a uniform that was deceptively simple, lacking the ornate decorations favored by most military hierarchies. I am Captain Blake of the Earth vessel Defiance, the human said, his voice carrying across the void with quiet confidence. I understand you've been waiting for us. Vex's eyes narrowed. Captain Blake, sensors indicate no human vessels in this sector. Are you attempting to deceive the Council? The human's expression didn't change, but something that might have been amusement flickered in those blue eyes. Not deceiving, High Commander. Simply demonstrating that your understanding of human capabilities may be somewhat limited. Explain. Yourself. In 1 minute, we will decloak and assume standard formation. I thought it might be prudent to warn you first, given that sudden appearances can sometimes be startling. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Vex felt his blood run cold as the implications hit him. The humans hadn't been late. They'd been here all along, watching, waiting, studying the Council fleet with technology that made their sensors worthless. "All vessels to combat alert," he commanded, his voice tight with barely controlled tension. "Weapons powered, but not targeted. We may be about to witness something unprecedented." The first sign wasn't visual. It was the sudden spike in gravitational readings that made every sensor array in the Council fleet scream warnings simultaneously. Sub-Commander Tor's crystalline form pulsed with agitated light as data streams cascaded across his displays faster than he could process them. "High Commander, the readings are off the scale. Whatever's happening, it's..." His words were cut off as reality itself seemed to fold in on itself, just 3,000 kilometers off their starboard bow. Space rippled like water disturbed by a stone, and from that impossible distortion emerged something that shouldn't have existed. The Defiance materialized from nothingness, and every being on every bridge in the Council fleet felt their understanding of the universe shift fundamentally. The vessel was enormous, easily twice the length of Vex's dreadnought, but its size wasn't what left them speechless. It was the ship's very existence that defied comprehension. The hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating an effect that made the vessel appear to be cut from the fabric of space itself. Strange geometries played across its surface, sections that seemed to exist in more dimensions than physics allowed. Energy patterns danced along its flanks and colors that had no names, following mathematical principles that hurt to contemplate. "By the void," whispered Sub-Commander Krill, his mandibles clicking in a rhythm that betrayed his species' most primal fear responses. "What is that thing?" Vex found himself unable to answer. In 3 millennia of galactic dominance, his species had encountered vessels that were larger, more heavily armed, more aesthetically pleasing. But never had they seen something that so completely violated their understanding of what was possible. "Sir," Tor's voice cracked with strain, "the vessel is generating fields we can't identify. Our sensors are detecting energy patterns that shouldn't be stable, materials that register as existing in quantum superposition, and..." He paused, his crystalline form dimming as he struggled to process the data. "High Commander, according to our instruments, sections of that ship exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously." The communications array crackled to life again, and Captain Blake's calm voice filled the bridge. "High Commander Vex, I hope our arrival hasn't caused any system malfunctions. I know our technology can sometimes interfere with conventional sensor arrays." Vex forced himself to respond, though his voice sounded strange even to his own ears. "Captain Blake, explain how your vessel achieved such a cloaking effect. Our records indicate that humanity has barely achieved interstellar travel." "Your records are accurate, as far as they go," Blake replied. "We are indeed new to the galactic community. But you seem to have made an assumption that being new means being primitive." On the main display, the Defiance began to move, and its motion was wrong in ways that made seasoned space veterans feel sick. The ship didn't accelerate in the conventional sense. It simply existed in one location and then existed in another, as if the concept of traveling through space was somehow beneath it. "Impossible," breathed Navigation Officer Quinn from the Rim World's contingent. "Nothing can move like that without generating massive energy signatures. The inertial forces alone should tear that vessel apart." But the Defiance continued its impossible dance, shifting position with casual disregard for the laws of physics that governed every other vessel in the galaxy. Worse, as it moved, the space around it seemed to bend and flow, creating gravitational lensing effects that made distant stars appear to writhe like living things. "High Commander," Tor reported, his voice barely above a whisper, "I'm detecting power signatures from that vessel that exceed our entire fleet's combined output by several orders of magnitude. But the energy readings are strange. It's as if they're drawing power from sources that don't exist in our dimensional framework." Vex felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: genuine fear. Not the tactical concern of facing a superior enemy, but the primal terror of encountering something that operated by rules he couldn't understand. All vessels maintain defensive posture. Do not take any action that could be construed as hostile. Captain. Blake's voice returned, and there was something in his tone that hadn't been there before, not arrogance, but a quiet confidence that was somehow more unsettling than any boast. High Commander, I believe you requested a demonstration of human capabilities. What you're seeing is our species' first attempt at what we call a deep space interdiction vessel. It's not our most advanced design, but we thought it appropriate for this occasion. The implications of Blake's words hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. This impossible vessel, this thing that casually violated the fundamental laws of physics, was primitive by human standards? Their first attempt? How? Vex managed to ask, his voice barely controlled. How is any of this possible? Ah, Blake replied, and there was definite amusement in his voice now. That's the question, isn't it? You see, High Commander, every species in the galaxy has approached the problem of space travel, warfare, and technology from the same basic assumption that the universe has rules, and those rules must be obeyed. The Defiance performed another impossible maneuver, this time seeming to exist in 3 different locations simultaneously before snapping back into a single coherent form. Humans have a different philosophy, Blake continued. We believe that if the universe has rules, then there must be ways to change those rules. What you're witnessing isn't advanced technology in the conventional sense. It's applied creativity. We didn't just study the laws of physics. We found ways to rewrite them. Vex stared at the impossible vessel before him, understanding finally dawning like a cold sunrise. The Council had spent millennia perfecting technologies that worked within the established boundaries of reality. They had become masters of the possible, kings of the known universe, but the humans had done something else entirely. They had looked at the impossible and made it inevitable. High Commander, Captain Blake's voice carried across the void with the same unsettling calm that had marked all his communications. I believe the Council requested a demonstration of our combat capabilities. With your permission, I'd like to show you what the Defiance can do. Vex felt his throat constrict. The human vessel hung in space before his fleet like a nightmare given form, its reality-bending presence making every instrument on every ship scream contradictory readings. Captain Blake, this is supposed to be a peaceful evaluation. The Council protocols specifically state that we demonstrate our worthiness to join the galactic community. Blake interrupted smoothly. I assure you, High Commander, no harm will come to your vessels. But I think you'll find that our definition of demonstration is somewhat broader than what you might expect. Before Vex could respond, the Defiance began to change. Its hull, already a study in impossible geometries, started to reconfigure itself in ways that made experienced spacers grab their consoles for support. Sections that had been solid became translucent, revealing internal structures that seemed to extend into dimensions that shouldn't exist. Weapon ports opened along its flanks, not the conventional energy projectors or missile tubes that marked every other warship in the galaxy, but apertures that looked like tears in reality itself. Sir, Sub-Commander Tor's voice cracked with strain. The human vessel is generating energy patterns that are registering as impossible. Our computers keep crashing when they try to process the data. All vessels, maintain position, Vex commanded, though his own voice betrayed his growing unease. Do not take any action unless directly threatened. The Defiance completed its transformation, and what emerged bore only passing resemblance to the vessel that had first decloaked. It now bristled with weapons that existed in states of quantum uncertainty, defenses that folded space around themselves, and propulsion systems that treated the concept of momentum as a polite suggestion rather than a physical law. Now, Blake's voice continued, I should mention that humans have spent considerable time studying the various military doctrines employed by the galactic community. Your species, High Commander, favors overwhelming firepower and defensive superiority. The Crystalline Collective relies on precision strikes and coordinated fleet movements. The Rim worlds prefer mobility and unconventional tactics. As he spoke, holographic displays materialized around the Defiance, showing detailed schematics of every vessel in the Council fleet. Not external views, but complete internal blueprints showing crew positions, weapon systems, structural weak points, and even the emotional states of individual officers. All interesting approaches, Blake continued conversationally, but each limited by the assumption that you must choose one doctrine over another. Humans, as I mentioned, have a different philosophy. What happened next would be discussed in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. The Defiance didn't attack the Council fleet. It demonstrated that the very concept of attack and defense was obsolete. The human vessel began to replicate itself, creating dozens of perfect copies that spread throughout the formation. But these weren't holographic projections or drone fighters. Each copy possessed the same impossible properties as the original, the same reality warping capabilities, the same casual disregard for physics. Multiple contacts. Tor shouted, his crystalline form pulsing with panicked light. Dozens of them. They're surrounding the fleet. But even as the copies took position, they began to change, adapting their configurations to match the tactical doctrines of each species present. The vessels near Vex's dreadnought transformed into massive gun platforms that dwarfed anything in the hegemony's arsenal. Those approaching the crystalline ships became swift, precise interceptors that moved with mathematical perfection. The copies facing the Rimworld's flotilla took on forms that defied categorization, shifting and flowing like liquid metal given purpose. You see, Blake explained, his voice now coming from all directions as each copy spoke in perfect unison. We studied your doctrines not to choose between them, but to combine them. Why limit ourselves to one approach when we can employ them all simultaneously? The demonstration reached its crescendo as the copies began to coordinate, creating a tactical display that showcased every major military innovation in galactic history. They performed the hegemony's classic pincer movement, while simultaneously executing the collective's precision strikes and the Rimworld's chaos protocols. But more than that, they combined these approaches in ways that created entirely new possibilities, tactical innovations that no single doctrine military could have conceived. Impossible, whispered Sub-Commander Krill. No command structure could coordinate such complex operations. The computational requirements alone would exceed any known AI system. You're right, Blake acknowledged. No single AI could manage this. But then, we're not using a single AI. Each copy of the Defiance contains a complete artificial consciousness, and they're all networked together through quantum entanglement. We don't have one ship with one mind. We have a fleet with a collective consciousness that can think in ways no individual could achieve. The copies began to fade, dissolving back into the quantum foam from which they'd emerged, until only the original Defiance remained. But the message had been delivered with crystalline clarity. Humanity didn't just possess superior technology, they had fundamentally redefined what warfare itself could be. High Commander, Blake said, his voice returning to its original calm tone, I believe this concludes our demonstration. Unless, of course, you'd like to see what happens when we stop playing by the rules entirely. Vex stared at the human vessel, his mind struggling to process what he'd witnessed. Every military doctrine in the galaxy had just been rendered obsolete by a species that had been spacefaring for less than a century. The humans hadn't just proven their worthiness, they'd proven that the entire galactic community had been thinking too small. Silence stretched across the void for long minutes after the Defiance completed its demonstration. On every bridge in the Council fleet, beings who had spent lifetimes mastering the art of warfare stared at displays that still showed impossible readings, their minds struggling to process what they'd witnessed. High Commander Vex stood motionless on his command deck, his 4 arms hanging at his sides as he contemplated the fundamental shift in galactic power that had just occurred. In the span of less than an hour, humanity had demonstrated that every assumption about technological limits, military doctrine, and the very nature of reality itself was open to revision. High Commander, Sub-Commander Tor's voice was barely a whisper, his crystalline form dim with exhaustion from trying to process data that defied comprehension. Orders, sir? Vex didn't immediately respond. How did one give orders when the basic framework of understanding had been shattered? The Council fleet had come here to evaluate a primitive species, to determine whether they deserved recognition as a minor member of the galactic community. Instead, They'd encountered something that made their own civilization look like children playing with toys. Captain Blake's voice cut through the silence, still carrying that same unsettling calm. "High Commander, I hope our demonstration has provided the information the Council requested. We're prepared to answer any questions you might have about our capabilities." "Questions," Vex repeated, the word tasting strange in his mouth. "Where did one even begin?" "Captain Blake, the technologies you've displayed, they violate fundamental principles that have governed galactic civilization for millennia. How long has humanity possessed these capabilities?" "The Defiance completed its trials 6 months ago," Blake replied matter-of-factly. "Though I should clarify that it represents our first generation of deep space vessels. Our research teams have already identified several areas for improvement." The implications hit the Council fleet like a physical blow. 6 months. These humans had gone from barely achieving interstellar flight to rewriting the laws of physics in the span of half a year. And they considered this primitive technology. "Sir," Communications Officer Quinn from the RimWorld's contingent spoke up hesitantly. "Should we alert the Council?" "This changes everything." Vex considered the question. The Galactic Council had ruled the known universe for 3,000 years, their authority based on the assumption that they represented the pinnacle of technological and military development. But the humans had just demonstrated that the pinnacle was merely the bottom of a mountain that stretched into dimensions the Council hadn't known existed. "Captain Blake," Vex said slowly, "what does humanity want from the galactic community?" The question hung in space for a moment before Blake responded, and there was something different in his voice now, not the calm confidence of before, but something warmer, more human. "High Commander, we want what every species wants to survive. To grow, to explore the universe and find our place in it. We're not conquerors or destroyers. We're explorers, and we've discovered that the universe is far more malleable than anyone imagined." The Defiance began to move, but this time its motion was conventional, almost gentle. It approached the Council formation with what could only be described as courtesy, its reality-bending aura dimmed to levels that wouldn't interfere with nearby sensor systems. "We understand that our capabilities might seem threatening," Blake continued, "but we hope to use them to benefit all species. The technologies we've developed could revolutionize everything from medicine to transportation to energy production. We're not here to replace the Council, we're here to offer partnership." Sub-Commander Krill's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter or hysteria. "Partnership? You've just demonstrated that you could destroy our entire fleet without effort. You could reshape the galaxy according to your whims. Why would you offer partnership to species so far beneath your capabilities?" "Because," Blake said, and his voice carried a warmth that had been absent from all their previous communications, "we learned something important during our rapid technological development. Innovation doesn't come from isolation, it comes from diverse perspectives working together. Every species in this fleet has something unique to offer, ways of thinking that we haven't considered." The Defiance came to rest at the center of the Council formation, its presence no longer threatening, but somehow reassuring. "We could have developed our technologies in secret and emerged as conquerors. Instead, we chose to reveal ourselves honestly, to seek cooperation rather than domination. That's what makes us human, not our technology, but our belief that the universe is better when we work together." Vex felt something shift in his understanding, a perspective that went beyond military capabilities or technological superiority. The humans weren't just offering alliance, they were offering a new way of thinking about civilization itself. "High Commander," his own communications officer reported, "we're receiving priority transmissions from the other Council fleets. They're reporting similar encounters with human vessels. It appears the Defiance is not alone." Blake's voice carried a note of what might have been amusement. "We thought it best to introduce ourselves to all the major powers simultaneously. We humans have a saying, go big or go home. We decided to go big." The full scope of humanity's emergence became clear. While the Council had been focused on the single evaluation, the humans had been making contact with every major civilization in the galaxy, not as supplicants seeking admission, but as equals offering partnership. "The Council will need time to process this development," Vex said finally. "This is unprecedented in galactic history. Of course, Blake replied. We understand that change takes time. But High Commander, the universe is vast, and there are wonders out there that we can't even imagine yet. We'd like to explore them together. As the Council fleet began its journey back to the galactic core, the Defiance remained at the rendezvous point, a silent sentinel that had forever changed the balance of power in the galaxy. The age of human isolation was over, and the age of true galactic cooperation was about to begin. Behind them, space itself seemed to whisper with possibilities that had never existed before, possibilities that could only be realized when different species, different ways of thinking, came together to rewrite the rules of reality itself. The universe had just become a much more interesting place.